Sarah Martinez had always been the careful type. At 25, she worked as a librarian in downtown Chicago, lived in a modest apartment with her cat Whiskers, and rarely stayed out past 10 p.m. Her biggest rebellion was reading romance novels during her lunch break. So when her best friend Emma insisted on throwing her a birthday party at the exclusive nightclub Velvet, Sarah felt completely out of place. The club pulsed with expensive energy. Crystal chandeliers hung from black ceilings, and beautiful people in designer clothes moved like they owned the world. Sarah tugged at her borrowed red dress, feeling like a fraud among the glamorous crowd. Emma had spent 2 hours doing her makeup and hair, transforming quiet Sarah into someone she barely recognized in the mirror. "Stop fidgeting," Emma whispered, pressing a champagne flute into Sarah's hand. "You look amazing. Tonight is about celebrating you." Sarah sipped the bubbly liquid and tried to relax. The music was louder than anything she was used to, and the lights flashed in patterns that made her dizzy. She watched couples dancing, their bodies moving together with confidence she had never possessed. Emma disappeared to get more drinks, leaving Sarah standing alone near a marble pillar. That's when she noticed him. He sat in a private booth elevated above the main floor, surrounded by men in expensive suits. Even from a distance, his presence commanded attention. Dark hair slicked back, sharp jawline, and eyes that seemed to see everything. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly salary. When their eyes met across the crowded club, she felt something electric shoot through her body. The stranger said something to one of his companions, never breaking eye contact with Sarah. She quickly looked away, her cheeks burning. When she dared to glance back, he was gone from the booth. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she searched the crowd, but couldn't find him anywhere. Emma returned with 2 more drinks and a mischievous grin. "I see you've noticed the VIP section. That's where the real money hangs out. Rich businessmen, politicians, probably some criminals too." She laughed as if it was a joke, but something cold settled in Sarah's stomach. As the night wore on, Sarah began to feel strange. The room spun more than it should from just 2 glasses of champagne. Her words came out slurred when she tried to speak to Emma. Colors became too bright, sounds too loud. She gripped Emma's arm. "Something's wrong," she managed to say. "I don't feel right." Emma's face blurred in and out of focus. "Maybe you should sit down. I'll get some water." Sarah nodded, but when she tried to walk to the lounge area, her legs wouldn't cooperate. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Strong hands caught her before she could fall. She looked up into concerned brown eyes she didn't recognize. "Easy there," a gentle voice said. "Let me help you." The man was handsome in a friendly way, with sandy hair and kind features. He wore a simple button-down shirt that marked him as definitely not VIP material. Sarah felt grateful for his normal appearance after the intensity of the mysterious stranger from earlier. "Thank you," she whispered. "I just need to sit." He guided her to a quieter corner where red velvet chairs surrounded small tables. Sarah collapsed into one, her head spinning violently. The helpful stranger sat across from her, his expression worried. "I'm Marcus," he said. "You don't look so good. Maybe I should call someone for you?" Sarah tried to remember Emma's phone number, but her thoughts felt like they were swimming through thick honey. "My friend. Emma. She has blonde hair." "I'll find her," Marcus promised. "Just wait here, okay? Don't go anywhere with anyone else." But as soon as Marcus disappeared into the crowd, Sarah felt those strong hands again. This time they weren't gentle. They pulled her up from the chair with authority that brooked no argument. She tried to resist, but her body felt like it belonged to someone else. "Time to go," a deep voice said near her ear. Sarah's vision was too blurry to make out faces, but she caught glimpses of expensive fabric, gold jewelry, and the scent of costly cologne. Her feet dragged across marble floors as someone half carried her toward what looked like a back exit. She tried to call for Emma, for Marcus, for anyone, but only weak sounds escaped her lips. Cool night air hit her face as they emerged into an alley behind the club. A black car waited with its engine running. Sarah's survival instincts screamed at her to fight, to run, to do something, but her drugged body wouldn't respond to her desperate mental commands. "Please," she whispered as they approached the car. "I just want to go home." "You will," the voice replied, though it didn't sound reassuring. "Just not the home you're expecting." The car door opened, and she was guided inside onto leather seats that smelled like money and danger. As the door slammed shut, Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. Her carefully applied makeup was smudged, her borrowed dress wrinkled, and her eyes held a terror she had never seen before. The car began to move, carrying her away from everything familiar and safe. Through the tinted windows, she watched the bright lights of downtown Chicago fade into darkness. Her phone was somewhere back in the club with Emma, who probably thought Sarah had just gone to the bathroom or stepped outside for air. The men in the car spoke in low voices, their words too quiet for Sarah to understand through the fog in her brain. She drifted in and out of consciousness as the car navigated through streets she didn't recognize. Sometimes she would jolt awake when they stopped at traffic lights, hope flaring that she might escape. But her body remained stubbornly uncooperative. Time became meaningless. It could have been minutes or hours when the car finally stopped. Sarah heard the sound of heavy gates opening, then the crunch of gravel under tires. When the door opened again, she was in a different world entirely. A massive estate stretched before them, lit by elegant lanterns that lined a circular driveway. The house looked like something from a movie about old European nobility, all stone walls and arched windows. Perfectly manicured gardens surrounded the property, and she could hear the sound of a fountain somewhere in the darkness. This time, Sarah was lifted completely off her feet. Whoever carried her moved with practiced ease, as if unconscious women were a regular part of his job description. She caught fragmented impressions of marble hallways, expensive artwork, and crystal fixtures that threw rainbow patterns across cream-colored walls. They climbed a grand staircase that seemed to go on forever. Sarah's head lolled against someone's shoulder, and she breathed in that same expensive cologne from the club. At the top of the stairs, they walked down a long hallway lined with closed doors. Each door they passed felt like another step away from her ordinary life. Finally, they stopped. A door opened, revealing a room that took Sarah's breath away despite her condition. It was larger than her entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows draped in heavy silk curtains. A massive bed dominated the space, its dark wood frame carved with intricate designs. Everything spoke of wealth beyond imagination. Sarah was placed gently on the bed, her head sinking into pillows that felt like clouds. The room spun around her as she tried to focus on her surroundings. Through her blurred vision, she saw movement near the windows as someone adjusted the curtains, blocking out what little moonlight had filtered through. Footsteps approached the bed, and Sarah forced her eyes to track the movement. A figure sat down beside her, the mattress dipping under additional weight. She tried to turn her head to see who it was, but her neck muscles wouldn't cooperate. "Sleep now," the same deep voice from the car said softly. "Tomorrow we'll talk." Sarah wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Where was she? Who were these people? What did they want with her? But the drug in her system pulled her deeper into unconsciousness despite her fears. Her last coherent thought was wondering if Emma had called the police yet, or if anyone would even know to look for her. As darkness claimed her completely, Sarah Martinez's ordinary life officially ended. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the sound of a door closing and a lock turning. The quiet librarian, who had never broken a rule in her life, was now a prisoner in a world she couldn't understand, belonging to people whose intentions remained terrifyingly unclear. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, marking the official end of Sarah's 25th birthday. It had indeed taken a shocking turn, though she wouldn't fully comprehend just how shocking until morning came and revealed the true nature of her situation. Sunlight pierced through heavy curtains, dragging Sarah from the deepest sleep of her life. Her head pounded like someone was using it as a drum, and her mouth tasted like cotton mixed with regret. For a few blissful seconds, she thought she was in her own bed, recovering from the worst hangover in history. Then she opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was painted with elaborate frescoes of angels and clouds that definitely didn't belong in her tiny apartment. Sarah shot upright, immediately regretting the sudden movement as pain exploded behind her eyes. The room around her looked like it belonged in a palace, not anywhere she had ever been before. Memories crashed back in fragments. The club. The strange man in the suit, Marcus trying to help, being carried to a car. The enormous house with its intimidating gates. Sarah's breathing became rapid and shallow as panic set in. She was definitely not in Chicago anymore. The red dress from last night lay crumpled on the floor beside the bed. Sarah looked down and realized she was wearing an oversized men's shirt that smelled like expensive cologne. Her heart hammered as she tried to remember changing clothes, but found only blank spaces where memories should be. She swung her legs over the edge of the massive bed and stood on shaky knees. The windows called to her like beacons of hope. If she could see outside, maybe she could figure out where she was and how to get home. Sarah stumbled across the plush carpet, her bare feet sinking into luxury she had never experienced. The view through the windows made her knees buckle. Rolling hills stretched to the horizon, dotted with vineyards and distant mountains that looked nothing like the flat landscape around Chicago. A pristine lake sparkled in the morning sun, surrounded by gardens that belonged in fairy tales. This wasn't just outside the city. This was somewhere completely different. A soft knock at the door made Sarah jump. Before she could respond, the door opened and a woman entered, carrying a silver tray. She appeared to be in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes that reminded Sarah of her grandmother. "Good morning, dear," the woman said in accented English. "I'm Maria. I brought you breakfast and some fresh clothes." Sarah pressed herself against the window. "Where am I?" "What is this place?" Maria set the tray on a small table near the fireplace. "You're safe. That's what matters. Mr. Romano will answer your questions when he's ready to see you." Romano. The name meant nothing to Sarah, but the way Maria said it suggested she should know who that was. "I need to call my friend Emma. She'll be worried sick." "I'm afraid that's not possible right now," Maria replied gently. "But please, you should eat something. You've been sleeping for nearly 12 hours. Sarah's stomach growled traitorously at the mention of food. The tray held fresh fruit, pastries that looked like works of art, and coffee that smelled like heaven. Her practical side warred with her fear. She needed strength if she was going to find a way out of this situation. "I'm not hungry," she lied, though the growling of her stomach betrayed her. Maria smiled sadly. "I understand you're frightened. Anyone would be. But starving yourself won't help your situation. Mr. Romano is not an unreasonable man, but he values strength over weakness." The mention of strength over weakness sent a chill down Sarah's spine. What kind of person spoke about their employer in terms of strength and weakness? She thought about the men in expensive suits at the club, Emma's joke about criminals in the VIP section. "What does Mr. Romano want with me?" Sarah asked. "That's not my place to say," Maria replied. "But I can tell you that fighting will only make things harder for everyone. Now please, get dressed. He's waiting to see you downstairs." Maria indicated a selection of clothes laid out on a chair near the dresser. Jeans, a simple white blouse, and undergarments that were somehow exactly Sarah's size. The thought of someone knowing her measurements made her skin crawl. "How do you know what size I wear?" "Mr. Romano is very thorough," was all Maria would say. After Maria left, Sarah stood alone in the opulent room, trying to process her situation. Everything about this felt like a movie or a dream, except for the very real terror coursing through her veins. She considered refusing to get dressed, staging some kind of protest, but the memory of Maria's words about strength and weakness made her reconsider. Sarah changed quickly, her hands shaking as she pulled on the unfamiliar clothes. They fit perfectly, which was somehow more terrifying than if they had been wrong. It meant this wasn't random. Someone had planned this. A different knock came at the door, this one more authoritative. A man entered without waiting for permission. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with scars on his hands and a face that suggested violence was part of his job description. "Mr. Romano will see you now," he said simply. Sarah had no choice but to follow him out of the room and down the grand staircase she vaguely remembered from the night before. In daylight, the house was even more impressive and intimidating. Oil paintings of stern-faced men lined the walls, and every surface gleamed with the kind of perfection that only serious money could buy. They walked through hallways that seemed to go on forever, past rooms glimpsed through doorways that revealed libraries, sitting rooms, and what looked like a formal dining room capable of seating 30 people. Sarah tried to memorize the layout, looking for potential escape routes, but the house was a maze of luxury designed to confuse and overwhelm. Finally, they stopped outside a set of double doors made from dark wood and carved with intricate patterns. The escort knocked once and waited for a response before opening the doors and gesturing for Sarah to enter. The room beyond was clearly an office, but unlike any Sarah had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked ancient and expensive. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, its surface clear except for a single folder and a crystal paperweight. Behind the desk sat the man from the club. In daylight, he was even more striking than Sarah remembered. Dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that seemed to see directly into her soul. He wore a perfectly tailored suit despite the early hour, and when he looked up from the papers he was reading, Sarah felt that same electric shock from the night before. "Miss Martinez," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. "Please, sit." Sarah remained standing near the door, every instinct telling her to run. "I want to go home." He gestured to a leather chair positioned in front of his desk. "We have things to discuss first. Sit." The word carried such authority that Sarah found herself moving toward the chair before she consciously decided to obey. She perched on the edge, ready to bolt at the first opportunity. "My name is Dante Romano," he continued, setting aside his papers and giving her his full attention. "I apologize for the abrupt nature of our meeting, but circumstances required immediate action." "Circumstances?" Sarah's voice cracked. "You drugged me and kidnapped me." "You were in danger," Dante replied calmly. "The man who approached you at the club, Marcus, was not the good Samaritan he appeared to be." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Dante opened the folder on his desk and extracted a photograph, sliding it across the polished surface toward her. Sarah leaned forward reluctantly and saw Marcus's friendly face staring back at her from what looked like a police mugshot. "Marcus Volkov works for my enemies," Dante explained. "He specializes in acquiring assets they can use against people like me. Young women, specifically. Women who can be leveraged for information or cooperation." The room began to spin again, but this time it wasn't from drugs. "That's impossible. He was helping me." "He drugged your drink," Dante said matter-of-factly. "My men intervened before he could complete his task, which would have involved taking you to a very different location for very different purposes." Sarah stared at the photograph, trying to reconcile the kind stranger from the club with the criminal Dante was describing. You're lying. You're the one who kidnapped me. I removed you from an immediate threat, Dante corrected. Whether that constitutes kidnapping depends on your perspective. Any perspective would call this kidnapping. Sarah shot to her feet, anger overriding her fear. You can't just take people because you think you're protecting them. Dante leaned back in his chair, studying her with those intense dark eyes. You're right. Under normal circumstances, such actions would be unconscionable. But these are not normal circumstances, Miss Martinez. What does that even mean? Instead of answering directly, Dante reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a manila envelope. He extracted several photographs and spread them across the desk like playing cards. Sarah gasped when she saw they were all pictures of her. Getting coffee near her apartment, walking into the library where she worked, sitting in her favorite cafe reading a book. Someone has been watching you for weeks, Dante said quietly. These were found in Marcus's possession when my men searched him. Sarah's legs gave out, and she collapsed back into the chair. Why? I'm nobody. I work in a library. I don't have money or connections or anything anyone would want. That's what I intend to find out, Dante replied. But until we understand why you've become a target, you're safer here than anywhere else. I just want to go home, Sarah whispered, tears starting to flow despite her efforts to stay strong. Dante's expression softened slightly. I understand this is overwhelming, but going home now would likely result in your death or worse. My enemies don't make mistakes twice. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Who are you? Who are these enemies? I run a family business, Dante said carefully. We have competitors who don't always play by conventional rules. Sometimes those competitors target innocent people to gain advantages. The way he said, family business, made Sarah's blood chill. Combined with the isolated estate, the armed guards she had glimpsed through windows, and the way everyone spoke about Mr. Bay, Romano, with a mixture of respect and fear, a terrible picture was forming. You're Mafia, she said quietly. Dante neither confirmed nor denied her statement. I'm a businessman who operates in spheres where traditional law enforcement is ineffective. Call it what you will. Sarah felt like Alice falling down the rabbit hole, except instead of Wonderland, she had landed in a world of organized crime and mortal danger. Her quiet life working with books and living with her cat seemed like a fairy tale from someone else's existence. How long do I have to stay here? She asked. Until we neutralize the threat against you, Dante replied. Or until we determine why you became a target in the first place. And if you can't? For the first time, Dante hesitated. Let's focus on the possibilities we can control. Sarah understood the implication. If they couldn't solve the mystery of why someone wanted her, she might never be able to return to her old life. The thought was almost too overwhelming to process. I need to call Emma, she said desperately. She'll think something terrible happened to me. Something terrible almost did happen to you, Dante pointed out. Your friend will be told you had a family emergency and needed to leave town suddenly. That's a lie. It's a necessary deception to keep both of you safe, Dante replied firmly. Miss Martinez, I realize this situation is far from ideal, but the alternative was allowing Marcus to succeed in his mission, which would have resulted in outcomes I don't think you want to contemplate. Sarah slumped in her chair, overwhelmed by the impossibility of her situation. Yesterday morning, she had been worried about whether to buy generic cereal to save money. Now she was apparently a target for international criminals and under the protection of someone who might be just as dangerous as her enemies. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now you rest, you recover from last night's ordeal, and you let my people investigate the threat against you, Dante said. The estate has everything you need. Maria will take care of you, and my security team will ensure your safety. I'm a prisoner. You're a guest whose departure would be inadvisable. Dante corrected with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah realized she was looking at a man accustomed to having his will obeyed without question. The polite words and reasonable tone couldn't disguise the underlying steel in his voice. Whether she was a guest or a prisoner, the practical result was the same. She wasn't leaving until Dante Romano decided she could leave. "One more thing," Dante added as Sarah stood to go. "My men tell me you fought the sedative longer than expected last night. That shows admirable strength. You'll need that strength in the days ahead." As Sarah was escorted back to her luxurious prison, she wondered what exactly Dante Romano expected her to need strength for. The answer to that question would prove more complicated and dangerous than anything her quiet imagination could have conjured. 3 weeks into her stay at the Romano estate, Sarah had settled into a strange routine that felt like living in a luxury prison. She woke each morning in the opulent bedroom, ate meals prepared by Maria in the formal dining room, and spent her days exploring the vast house under the watchful eyes of Dante's security team. The library had become her sanctuary. It rivaled any university collection she had ever seen, with books in multiple languages covering everything from classical literature to modern business theory. She suspected some of the volumes were worth more than her annual salary, but Dante had given her free access to read whatever interested her. It was in this library that their relationship began to change. Sarah was curled in a leather reading chair with a worn copy of Jane Austen when Dante appeared in the doorway. Over the past weeks, she had seen him only briefly during their daily security briefings, where he would update her on the investigation into the threat against her life. Progress was slow, he always said, but his people were making headway. "Pride and Prejudice?" he asked, noting the book in her hands. "It's comforting," Sarah replied without looking up. "Familiar problems with predictable solutions." Dante moved into the room and selected a book from a nearby shelf. "I prefer Machiavelli. Less comforting, but more practical." Despite herself, Sarah smiled. "Of course you do." He settled into the chair across from her, and Sarah was struck by how different he looked when he wasn't behind his intimidating desk. The perfectly pressed suit was the same, but his posture was more relaxed, his expression less guarded. "You're angry with me," he observed. "I'm frustrated," Sarah corrected. 3 weeks, and you're no closer to figuring out why someone wants to hurt me. Meanwhile, I'm trapped here while my real life falls apart." "Your real life would have ended permanently if Marcus had succeeded," Dante reminded her. "We've confirmed that much through our investigation." Sarah set down her book and looked directly at him. Over the weeks, she had lost some of her initial terror and gained a healthy dose of irritation. "What exactly did you find out about Marcus?" "He works for the Kozlov organization," Dante said. "Russian operation based out of New York. They specialize in human trafficking, among other enterprises." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Human trafficking?" "Young women disappear," Dante explained matter-of-factly. "They're sold to buyers in various markets. Some become domestic slaves. Others work in different industries. None are ever seen again." Sarah felt sick. "But why me? I'm nobody special." "That's what we're still trying to determine," Dante admitted. "But the fact that they targeted you specifically suggests you're connected to something or someone they want leverage over." "I don't have connections," Sarah protested. "I work in a library. My parents are dead. I have no siblings. The most important person in my life is my cat." "Tell me about your parents," Dante said. Sarah had answered this question before, but she went through the details again. "They died in a car accident when I was 18. Dad worked for an insurance company. Mom was a nurse. We lived in the suburbs, went to church on Sundays, took family vacations to state parks." "What was your father's specific job at the insurance company?" "He was an investigator," Sarah replied. "He looked into suspicious claims, determined if people were lying about accidents or injuries." Dante leaned forward slightly. "What company?" Mutual security insurance. Why? Something shifted in Dante's expression. That name has come up in our investigation before, in a different context. What kind of context? The Kozlov organization has been laundering money through insurance companies, Dante explained, using fake claims to clean dirty cash. If your father was investigating that kind of fraud, Sarah's blood went cold. You think my father found something he shouldn't have? It's possible, Dante said carefully. If he discovered evidence of money laundering and documented it before his death, that information could be very valuable to law enforcement or very dangerous to criminals. But he's been dead for 7 years, Sarah protested. Why would they come after me now? Because someone might have recently discovered whatever your father found, Dante suggested, or because they think you know something that could hurt them. Sarah stood up abruptly and began pacing across the Persian rug. This is insane. I don't know anything about money laundering or insurance fraud. I was 18 when my parents died. I was too busy grieving to pay attention to Dad's work files. Work files, Dante repeated. Did you inherit any of your father's papers? Records from his job? Sarah stopped pacing. There were boxes. When we cleaned out their house, there were boxes of Dad's things. I put them in storage because I couldn't bear to go through them. Where is this storage unit? Chicago, near my apartment. Sarah sank back into her chair as the implications hit her. You think there's evidence in those boxes that someone wants to destroy? I think it's our best lead, Dante said. If we can examine your father's files, we might understand why the Kozlovs consider you a threat. So what do? We retrieve those boxes, Dante said simply. Tonight. Sarah blinked. Tonight? But I thought you said it was too dangerous for me to leave the estate. It is, Dante agreed, which is why you're not going. Those are my father's things, Sarah protested. I should be there. Absolutely not. Dante's voice carried the authority she had learned to recognize. My team will handle the retrieval. You'll remain here where you're safe. Something about the way he said it made Sarah study his face more carefully. Over the weeks, she had learned to read his expressions despite his efforts to remain unreadable. There was something he wasn't telling her. What aren't you sharing? She asked. Dante hesitated. The storage facility has been under surveillance. We spotted Kozlov operatives watching the entrance yesterday. They're waiting for me to show up, Sarah realized. Most likely, Dante confirmed, which means they still don't have what they're looking for. Your father's evidence must still be in those boxes. Sarah felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. After weeks of feeling helpless and confused, they finally had a concrete lead. But the thought of Dante's men walking into a trap made her stomach clench with worry she didn't want to examine too closely. How do you know they won't just kill your people and take the boxes? She asked. Dante's smile was cold and predatory. Because they'll discover they're not the only ones with surveillance capabilities, and because my people are considerably more experienced in this type of operation. That evening, Sarah found herself pacing the length of her bedroom, unable to concentrate on reading or sleep. Dante and his team had left 2 hours earlier for Chicago, and the estate felt different without his commanding presence. Even Maria seemed nervous bringing Sarah dinner on a tray instead of expecting her to eat in the formal dining room. Try to rest, Maria had advised. Mr. Romano knows what he's doing. But Sarah couldn't rest. She kept imagining scenarios where everything went wrong, where Dante was captured or killed because of her father's decade-old investigation. The thought of him being hurt because of her made her chest tight with an emotion she didn't want to name. At midnight, she heard cars pulling up the circular driveway. Sarah rushed to her window and saw the familiar black vehicles that had become part of the estate's landscape. Her heart hammered as she watched figures exit the cars and carry several boxes toward the house. 20 minutes later, a knock came at her door. Dante entered without waiting for permission. looking tired but triumphant. His suit jacket was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, and there was a smudge of dirt on his cheek that made him look more human than she had ever seen him. "We got them," he said simply. "Was anyone hurt?" Sarah asked, surprised by how much the answer mattered to her. "A few Kozlov operatives will have headaches tomorrow," Dante replied with satisfaction. "But my people are all fine." Sarah felt relief flood through her body. "What did you find?" "Everything," Dante said, settling into the chair near her fireplace. "Your father was more thorough than we imagined. He documented an entire money laundering operation, complete with bank records, fake claim numbers, and the names of everyone involved." "Including the Kozlovs?" "Especially the Kozlovs," Dante confirmed, "but also several high-ranking officials in Chicago's government, federal agents, and judges. This information could destroy dozens of careers and send people to prison for decades." Sarah sank onto the edge of her bed. "No wonder they want me dead." "They want the evidence destroyed," Dante corrected. "But now that we have it, we can use it to negotiate your safety." "How?" "We make a deal," Dante explained. "They stop hunting you, and we don't release your father's files to law enforcement, mutually assured destruction." It sounded simple, but Sarah had learned that nothing in Dante's world was ever simple. "Will they agree to that?" "They'll have to," Dante said. "The alternative is watching their entire organization collapse." Sarah studied his face in the firelight. "And what do you get out of this arrangement?" "I eliminate a threat to someone under my protection," Dante replied. "That's enough." But Sarah suspected there was more to it. Over the weeks, she had noticed things. The way Dante's expression softened when he looked at her, how he always seemed to appear in whatever room she was reading in, the fact that he had personally led tonight's dangerous mission instead of delegating it to his subordinates. "There's something else," she said quietly. Dante met her eyes across the dimly lit room. "Yes." "What?" Instead of answering with words, Dante stood and crossed to where Sarah sat on the bed. He stopped close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "You know what?" he said quietly. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. "Dante." "I know this complicates everything," he continued. "I know it's not what either of us expected when this started." "You're a criminal," Sarah whispered, though the words held no conviction. "Yes," Dante agreed. "And you're an innocent librarian who should run as far from me as possible the moment this is over." "Should," Sarah repeated. "But I'm hoping you won't," Dante admitted. The confession hung between them like a bridge Sarah could either cross or burn. 3 weeks ago, she would have chosen burning without hesitation. But 3 weeks ago, she hadn't seen the man behind the intimidating reputation. She hadn't watched him read poetry in multiple languages or noticed how gently he treated Maria. She hadn't seen him risk his own people's lives to protect hers. "The threat against me will be over soon," Sarah said. "Yes. And then I'll be free to leave." "Yes," Dante replied, though the word seemed to cost him something. Sarah reached up and touched the smudge of dirt on his cheek. "What if I don't want to leave?" Dante's carefully controlled expression cracked. "Sarah, I know what you are," she continued. "I know your world is dangerous and violent and nothing like the life I planned, but I also know that I feel more alive in this house with you than I ever did in my safe, quiet existence." "You could be killed," Dante said seriously. "People in my life become targets." "People in my life apparently become targets anyway," Sarah pointed out. "At least this way, I'd have someone capable of protecting me." Dante cupped her face in his hands. "If you stay, there's no going back. Once you're part of this world, you can never be innocent again." Sarah thought about her tiny apartment. her predictable job, her carefully controlled life that had been an illusion of safety anyway. Then she looked into Dante Romano's eyes and saw something she had never expected to find in the world of organized crime. She saw home. "Then I guess it's a good thing I was never as innocent as everyone thought," Sarah said, and kissed the most dangerous man she had ever met. Outside her window, the sun began to rise over the Romano estate, marking the dawn of Sarah Martinez's new life. Her 25th birthday had indeed taken a shocking turn, leading her not just to wake up in a Mafia boss's bed, but to choose to stay there permanently. It wasn't the future she had planned, but as Dante deepened their kiss and promised to spend the rest of his life keeping her safe, Sarah realized it was exactly the future she wanted. Sometimes the most shocking turns led to the most perfect destinations.